Hello, Robs. We're back with Hilda Lewis's The Witch and the Priest, a novel based on the true story of Joan Flower, the infamous 17th century witch. And we are in the middle of chapter 6. Well, you are. I've already blundered into chapter 7, but that will come later. All right. Samuel Fleming raised his startled head, and he thought her... Wait. Let's start over. Samuel Fleming raised his startled head, and we thought her of your company. And we thought her of your company. The hell does that mean? And we thought her of your company. We hanged her. And he beat his breast. I see what he's saying. Such bizarre wording in this book. Leave knocking upon your breast, Joan Flower laughed. It was not for love of your God she denied us, but for love of mine that was also hers. We had offended the master, so we set off again, going slowly upon our rubbed feet, and still Meg wept as she went, and always to the same tune. I have murdered my child, I am a murderer. Yes, I told her at last. The one that does not adore the master and takes away life is a murderer, but the one that adores him and offers a child for sacrifice is no murderer. He is a worshiper of the old faith that is older and truer than their Christianity. It is better to do murder, Samuel Fleming cut her short. With tears and with prayers a man may repent, but to abjure God, there is damnation, eternal torment. Eternal torment is our delight, for it is not we that shall suffer, but the enemies of the master. For us, eternal Sabbath in the wide fields of hell. Priest, we walk through the dark night right now, through the dark night now, resting a little, now walking again as well as we could. For our blistered feet, it was dawn when we came at last to our own house. A skim milk dawn, no light to it. I took the dead child from Meg, and she made no sound. I think she knew not where she was, nor what she did. I hid the child beneath the cloth, and we went to our bed. We went to our bed, but we did not sleep. Meg lay staring at the ceiling and wept. At last I said, You do well to weep, for the child is uselessly dead. It might have been much profit to you. It could have brought you the love of the master. But I think she did not hear, for even while I was speaking, dead, she said, dead, dead. Listen, I told her, and I nipped her hard in the fleshy part of the arm to bring back the wandering mind. This night you have offended two masters that between them rule this world and the next. Between angry God and angry devil, how shall you fare? One or other you must choose, and you must choose now. You cannot live one night forsaken by God and devil alike. And still she moaned and wept and had not courage to say one thing or the other. And suddenly, like a child, she was fast asleep. But in her sleep she wept and moaned. I dragged myself out of bed, all weary as I was, and summoned Rudderkin. He would not so much as open his mouth until I had paid him, a sure sign of the master's displeasure. Else he had not dared to ask his payment first. When he had licked himself clean of blood, he said, You did wrong to bring the unbeliever to the Sabbath. One who hovers between good and evil may yet become the pale God's spy to work us all great damage. That is why the master refused the sacrifice of the child to his glory. But a child's body is still a child's body. And when I did not understand, he said, It has fat for unguents, bones for powders. I cried out at that. Such a thing I had never done. I had killed quick and clean for the sacrifice, but I had never laid hands upon a body to tear it in pieces. It is the master's wish, Rudderkin said, but you must keep the girl out of it, lest she run mad and betray us all. I left Margaret in uneasy sleep, and under my shawl I hid the body of the child, and I never once thought, This is the child born of my child, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. I thought only, The child is dead, and nothing can restore it to life. Is it worse that its body work? Is it worse that its body work the master's will than rot in the earth? But for all that, I was glad that Margaret still slept. The sun was up when I came to the house of Joan Willamot over at Goodby. Again he lifted an anguished face, remembering how, for all her denials, all her beseeching, Joan Willamot had hanged, she and one other of whom he did not like to think. Leave your soul searching, Joan Flower said. Joan Willamot came to a just end. Her house stood low among trees, and it was still dark down there in the coppice when I knocked upon her door. She was not pleased when she thrust her face through the lattice and saw me standing there. At the Sabbath, she had been one of those that cried loudest against us. Come down, I called softly. Come down in the devil's name. But she would not stir until she had consulted with her familiar, which was a little tiny woman that stood upon the floor no higher than my hand. Samuel Fleming nodded, remembering how at the last Joan Willamot had confessed that this spirit was breathed into her mouth by William Barry of Langhorne. These flower women had brought others down with them to the grave. I knew she had agreed, Joan Flower said, for Pretty came flying down to me, and her mouth was wet with blood. She lighted upon my arm as it were a bird, the arm that carried the child beneath the shawl. I heard the bolts dragged backwards, and I went inside. We did our work with no one to hinder or to frighten us, for she was a widow and childless, and there was no one besides ourselves within the house. It was not pleasant work, but it was the master's will. We did not stay to eat, nor, indeed, could I have stomached food, but now and again we would stop to quench our thirst. My companion would tear at a piece of bread with bloody hands. Bread, Samuel Fleming said, all amazed. A witch cannot keep it within her body, so they say, and so, as you well know, I have seen for myself. That is nonsense, priest. How else should we live? Bread we do eat, when we have blessed it first in the devil's name, and water we may drink in the same fashion. But bread that has not been so blessed, and water that has not been so blessed, we take at our peril. And so I trudged homeward, sick and weary, and as I went, I plucked a straw from the hedge, and I said, unthinking, horse and bridle, away we go, horse and pelletus, ho, ho, ho. And before I knew it, there I stood at my own door. I was happy then because I knew the master had forgiven me. Samuel Fleming lifted unbelieving eyes. Do you truly believe so great a nonsense can work so great a miracle? Priest, does your God need help to work his miracles? Your master and my master can manage very well without our help. But the saying of those words is a token, the token of believing. Without the token of faith, both your God and mine are powerless. You are right, he said, and bowed his head. Priest, I am right in this, and in other matters, as you will come to find. I went into my house, and Margaret lay there on the bed as I had left her. She was candle white, and her hair spread upon the pillow, dank and dark with sweat. From his place among the ashes, Rutterkin stared with eyes of living coal. I signed the familiar he should go. I said nothing to my girl, but I blew up the fire and heated a pannikin of milk. And I broke off a piece of bread and set them down beside her. She would look at neither, and when at last hunger drove her, you might have thought that what you Christians say is true. For indeed the bread choked her. She could not swallow and put it down again. Then I took a flagon of wine she herself had brought down from the castle, and we drank together. Soon she was a little more cheerful, and while the wine was within her, I spoke. I said only what I had said before. With such as Meg, you cannot say a thing too often. Since her sacrifice had not been accepted, I told her she was nothing but a common murderer, and save for the master, she would hang. But he, in his infinite pity, though she was not his servant, had carried the body to a secret place, and so she was safe. When I talked to the child, her tears began once more to flow. I told her then that a child untimely dead, any mother's heart must burst with grief, but that same heart must lift with joy, knowing the child a blessed sacrifice to our Lord, who is the ancient God. But still she was not ready to come to the master. Nor did she come for many a night, but in the end I caught her in the same net that had taken me, the vanity of women and the lusts of the body. It was when she had a little recovered from the death of her child and was coming again to the appetites of women that I asked her what man would take her now her lover had cast her off and the castle forever closed against her. But, I said, at the aspect, you may taste again the sweetness of being desired and the fullness of desire satisfied. And at the Sabbath, you shall give your body to a spirit who will know how to play upon it better than any mortal man. When you have felt a spirit lie with you, you will never again suffer the touch of any man's flesh, unless he be of our coven, for that is your duty. But you will not endure any other man, be he prince or peasant, be it the earl himself or the clot of dung Vavasor. And there is one more thing, I said. Women grow old. What men, what man, though his own hair be gray and his gums empty, will take a hag to his bed? But the witch is forever young. She looked at me then with the cruel eyes of youth. You are well enough for your years, she said, but still you have lost a tooth and will lose more, and still you have a wrinkle or two and will have more. As for Joan Willamot and Ellen Green, their breasts are withered as empty sacks, and their hair is gray and thin. So it is by common daylight, I said. But did you not see them at the Sabbath? Their breasts were full, and their hair was dark, and their bodies eager. The Master keeps his promises, and we shall never grow old. As for you, girl, you are scarce 18, but still tears have done their work upon your face. Were you as virtuous as that virgin in whom, no doubt, you are childish enough to believe, yet you would no longer get you a man. And that was the end of the battle, for Meg was both lonely and lusting. You took her in the net of her lust, your own daughter. How do you bring souls to your God but through their desires? Desire is a prettier word, but it means the same. He did not answer, and she chuckled. You must be quicker with your arguments, priest, if you would trip me. I have no wish to trip you. He looked her full in the face. I wish only to bring your soul to God. I'd rather it were brought to the Master. I would it were one way or the other. It is cold where I wander alone. Who would trust your master to serve him? That was the condition. Yet still he shuts you out. Faithfulness was the condition. I was not faithful. But I forget my tale. I had won my girl's consent, but it was a grudging consent, useless. Unless she came with her whole heart, the master would not accept her. So I set about to win her, heart and soul. Samuel Fleming stared at her as if even now he could not make sense of her words. Your daughter, he said, your own child, flesh of your flesh, to snare her soul that it might go down to the pit forever. Do you not grieve for it now? Priest, do you grieve when you have won a soul to your God? He rose and walked about the room. Through the window he could see the great forms of trees, black against the sky, all pricked with stars. But the quiet night did not quiet him. On the contrary, as he stared, the great shapes seemed to move nearer, as though they were dark spirits come to mock him. Or worse, he crossed himself, and now they were nothing but trees in a quiet garden, familiar trees beneath whose kind branches he had so often walked. Do you regret souls won to your God? She asked her question again. He turned about. I am not quick enough to battle with you tonight. I am old. I am not well. Give me a little space. Leave me now. She shook her smiling head. You cannot drive me away, since your God permits me to stay. Then leave me of your charity. I can bear with wickedness, natural human wickedness. But you, your child, your own child, to lure her by her lusts and by her loneliness, to catch her in the snare of her misery. Can you not see I bear no more? And when, still smiling, she stood her ground, he said, If I die too soon, you will wander between heaven and hell for all eternity. He had touched her there. You are a clever, priest, and I will go, but you are not zealous enough for your master. He sat there, eyes closed against the sight of her. When he opened them again, she was gone. It was so cold now in the room that he shivered, yet lacked strength to make up the fire, or indeed to move at all. When Hester came in later, all triumphant, the spoon brandished in her hand, she found him, head fallen sideways, In his chair, he was so white, so cold that the spoon clattering to the floor, she cried out and fell to shaking him. When she had roused him at last, she went to the fire and raked it, all noisy with her fear, she that was a quiet woman, and went away to fetch him a hot drink. We must have a physician, she said. Yes, I shall ask Cecilia to send Master John Atkins. Pish and tush, he said. But for all that, he was weary to the bone. But since he must not die yet, for he had still to win a soul, he agreed to see the physician tomorrow. He had been wrong to forbid Joan Flower from further speaking. He saw that now. He was not sufficiently zealous. She was right in that. Her master had sent her as a challenge, and God had allowed it. God had allowed it since she, even she who had thrown away her baptism and the treasure of Christ's spilt blood, had still a soul to save. Saving it, he knocked a nail into the devil's coffin. He asked but one question as he sat sipping the hot drink, fresh with lemon, that Cecilia had sent down from the castle. She was forever sending down some delicacy he must otherwise go without. The cat, the little white cat, he asked. A queer little thing, Hester said. He drinks the sweet milk I put out for him, but he does not enjoy it. And that is odd in a cat. And, what is odder still, I scratched my arm this morning that he came and would have licked the place. I had to drive him away. Drive him away altogether, he advised, and then, more strongly, Hester, drive him away. She looked at him, surprised at such unkindness in this gentlest of man. He would not go, she said, nor would I send him. If I put him out, he would come back and mew at my door, and mew upon my heart. And every day his mew would grow fainter, but it would sound louder upon my heart, until I found him dead at my door. That is not charity. It's not even common sense, for he is a grand mouser. She took up the beaker and left him to his thoughts. That's the end of chapter 7, Rob. Goodbye. Goodbye.